Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about the differences between emergency remote learning and online learning. So, in the aftermath of COVID and all the school shutdowns, most families, I would say, at least those that were in traditional brick and mortar schools, have had the experience of getting to know what emergency remote learning looked like. And for many, it was a nightmare. Some school districts did a great job with it. I would say the majority really struggled with it. It was thrown together last minute. And while it did open up some doors for online learning because families now realize that online learning is an alternative, it also may have left a sour taste in the mouth of many because the experience was just so bad. And so today we're hoping to shed some light on the differences between what you might have experienced with your home school district during COVID and the school year 2021. It was still trickling a little bit into the school year after that. I would say for the most part, most schools are back to in-person learning, almost 100%. Some have shifted to a hybrid model. But we just want to show you that online learning is still an excellent alternative for families that are looking for something different. And it's not going to be what you experienced during COVID through those emergency shutdowns and the shift toward that remote learning. So we'll dive in. We have a great resource that we'll share with you at the end in the show notes. But really, we're just hoping to show that online learning is set up to be online learning, where the emergency remote learning was not, right? So the very first point that we'd like to point out is that emergency remote learning was implemented with little planning and by necessity. So most schools were just thrown into this, no prior experience with remote learning whatsoever. Teachers were expected to be miracle workers and make this happen for students just on a whim, like, all right, everything needs to be digital. That's a big ask. Teachers are saints, right? Like that is a big undertaking. Where online learning, right? This is something that, for example, for us, Mountain Point Academy, we're set up to be online. This is what we do. We were set up this way from the beginning. Everything is completely geared toward online learning. So there was no quickly try to digitize something. It's been set up that way for years, right?
Yeah. Well, and so the source that we're pulling this from, because this term emergency remote learning, I really like, because I think we just hear remote learning, but really in the wake of COVID, it was emergency remote learning. And this is coming from the annual report of the Digital Learning Collaborative. And so that's where this term comes from, just to give them credit. We thought this article was really great at highlighting the differences between this emergency remote learning and then online learning. And like Sarah said, MPA, we were established from the very beginning to be online. So we had been planning for years how to continue to innovate online learning and make it better, not just, oh, hey, we have all this content, let's scramble to put it online. It was already online. And then it became a matter of how can we make it even better, right? And I think that's the difference between this kind of state of frustration and scrambling versus the organization of what online learning already was. Mm-hmm. And I think too, in the wake of COVID, everything was just seen as temporary, right? This is temporary. We're only doing this for a little while. So there wasn't a lot of stock put into, let's really make this a digital platform, right? It was just a simple solution for what they had to do, so that students could still get an education in the wake of everything being shut down. Mm. Whereas with our online learning platform, again, it was already based on not being temporary, but a permanent solution, because we were designed to be an online school. And you could either be there for a short term, long term, take one class, take 6 classes, very flexible. It was all already built in. And so I think that's another big difference between this emergency learning versus online learning, because it's already established. And I think that's kind of the overlying theme, is that it was established and ready to go out of the box versus scrambling to digitize everything.
Right. No, that's a good point with it being temporary is maybe not as much care was put into it because it was like, all right, we just need to get this out there. We're not aiming for perfection. We just need to get it to a usable point, right, for our students.
Yeah.
But many students really, if you ask a lot of parents, not a lot of learning happened during that time anyway. So it's like, was it really effective at all? Like, did students learn anything? Or maybe the goal was just to keep them in the school mindset more than anything else, because so many kids got behind during that time. So it was a struggle for sure. And it was
Yeah.
for all classes too, so it's not like students had a choice with it. It was, this is what we're doing as a school. There was no, I'd like to take this one in person and this one online because of the nature of the situation. The entire thing was digitized, right? Like every single class. And now with online learning, you mentioned the flexibility factor. Students could just take one course online or two courses or a full course load. It's super scalable and very flexible and personalized to you and what your needs are. So definitely a different scenario there versus the forced digitized learning during COVID.
Yeah. For sure. And I think another big difference too is because all the schools were shutting down, that affected students and teachers at all districts, all schools. Like it was a wide scale thing. So it was, this emergency digitizing for all school districts, all private schools, like whatever you name it, right? It was affecting every single aspect. And then with online learning on the opposite end, it was, more catered towards a small group of students, a small group of teachers. So it was a little more organized because it didn't have to be to the masses, right? Like it was already set up to where it could be scalable for any number of teachers or students, but it wasn't such a big undertaking because, again, online learning was already designed to be scalable, innovative, and adjustable according to the number of students that were coming in or going out or the number of teachers that were available, right? Because at least with our program, a lot of our content is pre-recorded. And so really it wasn't a matter of, okay, we got to scramble and get all these teachers to record all this content. Like, no, it's already there. It's already done. And so it was very scalable because it was just there and you didn't have to work at it.
Right. No, I agree. And teachers and students, right? The chart, hopefully you guys take a look at this article when we post it. But it's true. It was for all students in the district, all teachers in the district, no choice, just everybody had to do this, and it was wide scale. So it was, like you said, a big undertaking, and this all had to get done within a certain time frame. It wasn't like us, like when we decided to start Mountain Point Academy, we obviously had our own targets on when we wanted this school to be up and running, but we had plenty of time. We had all the time in the world really to plan things out and make sure that this was going to be a school that was going to be a great thing, right? There was no rush to get this all done. So that's huge. And you mentioned the teachers too, teacher support. How many teachers had professional development in online learning before having to jump in with the COVID case, right? Like probably none, little to none. Like teachers are learning all these tools last minute. And like I said before, saints.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was so much for teachers to manage with what kind of support? Many of them have no background in online learning. The reason they signed up for this was to be a classroom teacher in person. So now to have to sit there and, in front of Zoom and try to make this work digitally when it's not actually meant to be that way. And your students didn't even sign up for this, right? With online learning, traditional online learning, students are choosing this as an alternative because they want to do it. It fits their learning style better. Yeah. Going back to that small subset of students and teachers, right? Like we get the teachers who want to be online teachers. We get the students who want to be online learners. Everybody was forced into this. So you combine the fact that it just wasn't that well done in the first place because of the situation, not because school districts weren't capable of it. I feel like if given time, they would have been capable of designing something that worked, but time was of the essence. It was temporary. So now all of these things create this perfect storm where, I don't know, it's no surprise that families had such a terrible experience with it. Because what can you expect given all those different parameters and trying to make something that works happen? But man, the teacher support was definitely lacking. And they were just expected to jump into this, make it work, no training, right? Like no best practices on how to manage a classroom of students on Zoom all at the same time, right? Like 15 to 30 kids on a Zoom call, like constantly having to mute kids because they're, maybe there's a screaming brother in the background or the TV's blaring or who knows what, but it's like, it's hard enough to manage all these kids in a classroom. Now you have to manage all of this on a Zoom screen and still try to come up with an effective lesson. Crazy. That's tough. Going with that though, that I'm assuming that most of the schools were doing synchronous. I know many were, some were probably doing some asynchronous stuff as well, but hopefully everyone knows from watching previous episodes what synchronous and asynchronous means. But basically synchronous is when the teacher is giving live instruction to the full classroom of students. So everyone's logging on at the same time, and that initial instruction is provided live by the teacher, where asynchronous means that you might still have live interactions with a teacher, but all of the initial instruction is provided, like Angela said, actually pre-recorded for the most part, or there's interactive lessons that the student does on their own time first. And then any follow-ups might be done with the teacher live, are not with an entire classroom full of students learning that material all together for the first time.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of one of the biggest defining factors of this kind of emergency response state was they did have to do it synchronous because it was a matter of, do I record this video and then send it out and then follow up with the student, or is it just easier to do it in person with everyone all at once, right? So it was more efficient, I think, for teachers to just do it live, because then it was like, all right, these kids were already planning on being at school. Let's just keep the time, deliver the instruction to the masses, right? Which that probably worked in certain ways, but in other ways it was probably detrimental. And online learning, especially with Mountain Point Academy, we are designed to be asynchronous so that students can have the flexibility to log on at their pace, learn at their pace, do those things, especially that I think came in handy for parents who maybe had to work, and they couldn't be there to help their kid or started at the right time. So it provided more flexibility for parents as well, I think, to be present with students, especially for those that were maybe elementary age and needed a little more support than like a teenager who could, all right, I know how to navigate online, I can do this, right? So I think it was definitely an interesting way of adapting, because it was like, what's the better route? Do we just do it all at once? Do we do a video and then follow up? But what does that look like? Kind of in survival mode, right? And kind of back to your point of how there was probably little teacher support in the beginning. It was also a very limited process for students, right? They didn't have much support either. It was just literally, all right, here you go. Here's the login, go with it, right? They didn't really get a crash course on this is what online learning is, and this is what makes it effective. And, it was just kind of, they're thrown into it, hit the ground running, do your best, right? Whereas online, it was already designed to kind of have a more extensive kind of initiation or orientation for students, right? They're given a chance to walk through and see what it's like. They can talk to someone who is well-versed in online learning about, okay, this is how this looks and this is how this works. They had that support to be walked through those processes for smoother onboarding so that they could just really dive in and be effective with their learning versus being in survival mode and trying to figure out all the different caveats associated with it.
Right. Right. And parents too. So when we onboard students, we usually ask the parents to be present during the first initial call with the student's academic mentor. So the
Mhm.
parents are in the loop on what's happening. I think parents were just these bystanders that were kind of peeking over the shoulder, like, okay, what are you doing? What are you supposed to be doing? Are you logged into the right class? How were they to know, right? There wasn't time to just train every single parent on how to make that happen. So for us, that's a big part of what we do, is making sure that the family feels comfortable with the platform and they have all the tools they need to get the support they need. We have live chat set up so students can ask questions at any time. And every student has a mentor too. So you have somebody that you can ask with questions, and it's individualized, so and going back to the whole asynchronous thing, like, we're set up to be that way. um it probably would have been more difficult, to your point, Ange, because if they would have decided to go asynchronous, where we tend to be more of a self-paced school, you can't have students just going from following a strict school schedule to being self-paced in the middle of a school year, because that's going to create a logistical nightmare too. So for us, right, like, if you need more time for an online school for Mountain Point Academy, if you need more time on a subject or particular topic, usually there's a little bit of that flexibility to spend more time on that topic. It's personalized to you.
Mhm.
And if you find a topic's especially easy, you can breeze right through it. Right? That's the beauty of self-paced learning, is it's really geared toward your learning style, and just um, really personalized. You take this personalized approach,
Mhm.
and that's a really big benefit of online learning, because in the traditional schools, no matter what, even with it being remote or in person, it doesn't matter. You're still following the regular schedule that is set up.
Yeah.
And if you're struggling on something, it doesn't matter. You're moving forward to the next topic with your class, whether you're ready to or not. And it's on you to get that extra tutoring help or get what you need, in place to be able to move on to the next topic. It's the pace is set for you. There's no spending extra time on something that you just spend extra time on. And sadly, you have to sit through stuff that you might already know, because the other, people in your class need to work through that as well. So that's one thing with the emergency remote learning. All the coursework was delivered to the full class. With online learning, the teachers can really personalize that and tailor it to the needs of each student.
Mhm.
So that's huge.
But
That's
we're
that's such a
talking,
great thing.
yeah, as you were talking, the thought came to me. I'm curious, like, how this affected students that were participating in it with this kind of scramble to digitize everything, and how it actually affected learning outcomes. So I just did a quick Google search, and this McKinsey.com says that their analysis showed that the impact on K through 12 student learning was significant, where on average students were 5 months behind in math and 4 months behind in reading by the end of the school year. So it
Yeah.
impacted that much because it was this, you know, they didn't have that classroom time with their teacher. It wasn't able to be as personalized, or, things like that. So it's just interesting to see kind of the correlation between the emergency learning versus this online learning. And I think still online learning, like you mentioned, kind of has a bad rap because they equate it to the trauma and the, oh my gosh, the school district did it so poorly. No, there are schools that are designed to be online learning, right? And I think one of the biggest hurdles for families that I heard a lot from friends who were participating with their kids in online learning was like, I just don't know what's going on at the school. Like, I'm not hearing from the teacher. I'm not hearing from the principal. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, how I'm supposed to be supporting my student. So they really were just in survival mode, right? So there was this inconsistency with communication and expectations and how they could support their student. Whereas with online learning, especially within our program, we make sure that it's a consistent communication, right? Where parents are getting weekly updates on, hey, this is how your student's doing. This is the progress that was made. Here's maybe some areas that they could work to improve, or maybe they need some additional support and tutoring in this subject matter. And so I think that too is a huge benefit for parents, because it is hard to track, all online activity of, well, what is my kid doing? How can I tell if they're performing? What are these parameters? And so if a good program, online learning is set up, there will be that communication with parents so that they can know where their students at. And as always, parents have access to our teachers who can give them an update of, hey, this is what I've noticed. This is how you can support your student. And so I think that in and of itself can help online learning be more effective for students.
Oh, 100%. I love that our teachers give a personalized message to the student every single week. So it's not just like a classroom-wide update. It's the teachers writing a message to your student every week.
Yeah.
And you see that. So you're in the loop on what's happening. Not only that, but you have your family portal. So you can see in real time when the student is logged in, if there's idle time, right? So it's time just being, yeah, look, mom, I'm logged in, right? But the system will log idle time so you can see, hey, yeah, my kiddo was logged in, but they weren't actually doing anything. All that stuff is, it's very transparent. So you can see, and it's never a surprise at the end of the course that your student's been struggling because it's been communicated with you the whole way through. So, or if your student's excelling too, I mean, that's something that's apparent as well. So we make sure that we're transparent and there are no surprises and your family feels 100% supported through the process. Meeting face-to-face with a mentor on a regular basis, getting that communication home and having that live support pretty much anytime you need it. During our office hours, you can reach somebody. So, and that was a struggle with the emergency remote learning is teachers were already spread so thin. Just the process of converting things to digital form would take up a teacher's bandwidth, let alone providing the instruction. Like they're already maxed out just putting this stuff online. That's a lot of work. Like it said, it took us a couple of years to fully prepare to get Mountain Point Academy up and running. These teachers had to do that in
Weeks.
what, right? Weeks, months, maybe, right? Depending on if it was made known during the summer or not. Otherwise, just like, quick, get this up, right? You need this up for next week. Go.
Yeah, I'd say even if it was ongoing, like, oh, hey, we have an assignment coming up next week, digitize it and get it ready to go, right? It was probably a continual ongoing process. Whereas with an online platform, you can just look and say, all right, this is our curriculum, this is what we're doing. And then we can go through it and audit it and make sure the content's still relevant, nothing needs to be changed. But you can do that at your pace slowly over time, right? It doesn't have to be a rollout of, hey, here's a brand new course that I had to create in 2 weeks. It's totally a different platform, a different delivery method, as well as the timeline. And so, like you said, kudos to all those teachers who had to just survive in emergency remote learning mode and get those things out, because not knocking those teachers at all, because it's a big undertaking. And I think for what was delivered and how it played out, schools did the best they could, teachers did the best they could. And so parents, if you're listening and you think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do online learning again, give it another chance, because it's a totally different ballgame when you can find a program that is designed to be set up that way, because that's what their purpose is. They want it to be individualized to the student. They want to provide an asynchronous platform that can allow for flexibility for those families that might need it, where the traditional classroom isn't working. Back to the stats we quoted earlier, a lot of students are now struggling in a traditional platform, a traditional classroom, right? And so an online learning platform might be the way for them to catch up on their skills or just get further ahead. And so, yeah, I'm curious, parents that are listening, in the comments, share some of your concerns still about online learning, your experiences with online learning through the school district, and how maybe it was good or bad or whatever, all the in between. We love to hear all the experiences, because then that helps us be a better online school too, because we're getting concerns from real consumers who are dealing with it and involved in it. So we'd love to hear your feedback so that we can just apply it to our school to make it even better and more innovative for students to be effective.
100%. Well said. So please drop us a comment, get in touch with us. We're always doing free consultations if you think that online learning might be something for you or something you want to try out. It's always something that you can get into. And you know what? The beauty of it is that if it doesn't work for your family, you're not tied to it. You can experiment with different learning platforms until you find something that's right for your students. So if you're considering it and you want to give us a try, we have summer approaching soon here. So summer school is a great opportunity to get your feet wet in online learning. So please, please, please give us a call. We'll set up a consultation with you and just see if it might be the right fit for you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.